Hello my friends, let's talk about free will. It is at times difficult for science-minded people to find a way to maintain that free will, the idea that our conscious self has some ability to self-determine or to do otherwise when there are multiple possibilities, intact. In fact, the idea of possibilities is itself hard to maintain under a strict deterministic worldview. Science itself encourages strict determinism over time because it is designed to find consistently demonstrable causal chain reactions. It establishes patterns and accepts those patterns as absolute, at least up until the point that they can be disproven by something else. It does not encourage questioning the very nature of how we think about these patterns that are established, nor how the human as an observer affects that search, nor how we tacitly extrapolate larger conclusions from simply demonstrated causal chains. If you watch my video on the 4 modes of knowledge making, you know that those things belong to rationality. Empirical thinking answers the question of how. Rationality asks the question of why and what then, from which new empiricism is designed to address the new questions of how that arise. This is to say that determinism is not, strictly speaking, a scientifically proven worldview, not a scientifically proven ontology. If you want to have a strictly scienceist position, you would only point to those causal chains which have been demonstrated fully and verbally recognize such, but you would not extrapolate further beyond what is actually demonstrated in each case. A strict determinist takes a step into rationality beyond what has been demonstrated to say that all causal chains are emergent phenomena resulting from the absolute accumulation of smaller processes over time. But given that we have yet to demonstrate a complete causal chain from quantum physics up through biology into a consistently demonstrable experience of mind and consciousness, the determinist denial of free will is not yet strictly scientific. It is not yet empirical. The critique of free will relies on a particular postulate that is considered a fundamental physical law. Causal chains happen in a simple direction, from small phenomena to emerging into larger phenomena. It is bottom up, and thus our experience of consciousness, being a larger process, thus must be an absolute result of an accumulation of smaller phenomena. The whole is merely the sum of the parts. So if it can be demonstrated that the whole can effectively determine one of its own causative parts in any degree, then we can reverse the causal flow in the strict determinist's argument and thus establish a degree of determining one's self. Now, I admit that my understanding of quantum mechanics or string theory is uneducated and limited. I am only aware of it as it has been explained to me by others, and there is one particular part that I want to focus on. It has been described to me that the state of a particle, the place, time, and manner of its existence, is first a range of possibility called a wave function. The wave function collapses and results in the specific determined physical phenomena that we observe on the larger scale. Until that wave function collapses, when the range of possibility collapses into a single actuality, we are not yet working with absolute determined physics, with the consistently demonstrable kind of physics that the strict determinist is extrapolating from. Recognizing this gives us a pivotal point, a moment in which the undetermined becomes determined. Now, if it is the case that the wave function ends up collapsing in exactly only one way as determined by previous events, then my thesis has no bearing. However, there is an avenue that gets us to a somewhat self-determined and therefore free will. If the brain, in deliberating what action to take, limits the range of possibility of how the wave function collapses for that matter which constitutes the brain, then the brain can be said to push itself toward certain ends. Even if the restriction of the wave function is only the smallest possible degree, whatever degree that is, our will is, to that degree, equally free. Perhaps even a series of small degree restrictions of the wave function creates the emergent phenomena of free will. The difference being that the process starts as a top-down, that the whole does something more than a less complex functional arrangement of the parts could. The best part of this thesis, however, is that it is an empirically testable theory. Once we become more adept at observing the processes of how wave functions operate, we could then compare that process to the same process within the material composition of neural networks like the brain. Should wave functions outside of neural networks prove different from wave functions within neural networks, it would give some credence to my thesis. Should they not, less credence. In the future, we will also, hopefully, be able to establish causal chains from the string level to the larger processes of mind, and hopefully be able to demonstrate how some concentric processes of larger processes affect the changes on smaller parts. So for my empirically focused listeners, there is little to fear from this thesis of free will because it subjugates itself to the evolving field of physics and experimental demonstration. To my rationalism-focused listeners, it maintains the common conception of free will in a way that is fairly limited to the scope of reasonable empiricism. But at this point, I'm afraid I must defer to physicists and psychologists to provide the information that could bring this thesis to a head. As I'm happy to state, I am not a scientist and I am unable to conduct this research myself. So hopefully this video happens to catch the ear of the right person, and maybe in the far-flung future can be tested and either proven or disproven. Thank you for watching, my friends. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. If you have friends that you think might be interested, share around with them. This is still a small channel, so the only way that we can grow is with your help. I have a new video coming out every Saturday, so I hope to see you next week. Thank you again, and remember, stay true.